The Jensens tried to convince themselves they'd experienced a collective hallucination brought on by stress and exhaustion. They spent Christmas Day going through the motions, opening presents with forced smiles, and keeping the children blissfully unaware of what had transpired during the night. Mark meticulously replaced every altered photo with backups from their albums, telling Sarah they should never speak of the incident again. Detective Howard arrived the day after Christmas, apologetic about the delay. His expression changed when Sarah mentioned the Santa intruder, his weathered face paling beneath his gray mustache. "You're not the first," he said quietly, glancing to ensure the children were out of earshot. "Every few years, someone reports something similar, always on Christmas Eve, always involving a man in a Santa suit." He explained the local legend of Thomas Kringle, a children's entertainer who played Santa at the town's department store in the 1970s. After being fired for inappropriate behavior, Kringle had kidnapped 3 siblings from a rural home on Christmas Eve 1977, leading them into the forest, where all 4 disappeared during a blizzard. The bodies of the children were found in spring, Detective Howard explained, but Kringle's remains were never recovered. The coroner determined the children died from exposure within hours of their abduction. "But that doesn't explain how someone got into our house," Mark insisted. The detective's eyes met Sarah's. "The strange thing is, in each reported sighting, there was never any sign of forced entry, and in each case, the children were unharmed, but family photos were altered." That night, after the detective left, Sarah discovered small presents at the foot of each child's bed, crudely wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. She screamed for Mark, who rushed upstairs and carefully opened one package with a pencil. Inside was a carved wooden figurine resembling their youngest son, Matthew. The craftsmanship eerily detailed down to his cowlick and the small birthmark on his cheek. The base was inscribed with crude lettering, "Next ici Terrace de Mace." The family packed essential belongings that night and fled to Sarah's parents' home 3 states away. They never returned to the Vermont house, abandoning most of their possessions and selling the property at a significant loss. Mark took a job transfer, and they settled in Arizona, as far from New England winters as they could manage. For 11 months, they believed they'd escaped. They changed their surname, enrolled the children in new schools, and never spoke of the incident. As the following December approached, Sarah began having nightmares. Dreams of a gaunt man in a Santa suit standing at the foot of her bed, watching her with those hollow eye sockets, the smell of frozen pine and decay filling her nostrils. On December 20th, 1 week before Christmas, Emma screamed from the living room where she'd been arranging ornaments on that artificial tree. Sarah found her daughter staring at their new family portrait, taken just 3 weeks earlier at a local studio, no altered with the children's faces scratched out. Mark installed security cameras that night, in every room, covering every angle. He stayed awake, watching the monitors while Sarah slept fitfully with the children in the master bedroom. At 3:17 am, every camera simultaneously showed static for exactly 3 minutes. When the picture returned, Sarah woke to find Emma missing from the bed. Frantic, they searched the house, finding nothing until Mark spotted the back door standing ajar, a trail of small footprints leading out into the desert landscape, accompanied by larger, deeper prints in the sand. The search party found Emma 3 days later, huddled in a shallow cave 5 miles from their home, physically unharmed, but irrevocably changed. She never spoke again, communicating only through drawings, endless sketches of a skeletal figure in a Santa suit, always with 3 small childlike figures standing behind him, their faces blank circles. Every Christmas Eve thereafter, no matter where the family moved or what precautions they took, they would wake to find one more family photo altered, the children's faces meticulously removed, and small handmade wooden figures of each family member placed beneath their beds. The figures showed them sleeping, with a tall figure standing watch at the foot of each bed. Police investigations yielded nothing. Cameras never captured anything. Fingerprint analysis of the figures revealed only smudges of decades-old fingerprints, matching the pattern of Thomas Kringle's prints from his employment records. Though experts insisted this was impossible, the children grew up, had families of their own, and the phenomenon continued, spreading to their households as well. the new generations of children's faces disappearing from family photos each Christmas Eve, replaced by empty voids. The discovery of the time capsule during demolition turned what hospital administrators had dismissed as staff folklore into something the local media couldn't ignore. Daniel became an unwilling celebrity, bombarded with interview requests and paranormal investigation shows eager to film reenactments. He declined them all, taking an extended leave of absence that eventually became a resignation from the medical profession altogether. What Daniel never told reporters, what he couldn't bring himself to admit publicly, was what happened during the 17 minutes between 3:33 am and 3:50 am on that Christmas morning. Minutes that security footage showed only as snow-like static. During those missing minutes, Daniel had found himself unable to move as the 7 ghostly children gathered around him in the darkened hallway. Their translucent bodies glowed with a soft blue light, their hospital gowns and bandages showing visible burns and injuries that had caused their deaths. "You're the last one who'll ever care for us," a small girl with pigtails and missing front teeth had said, her voice echoing as if from the bottom of a well. "They're going to destroy our home." "I'm not. I don't work in pediatrics," Daniel had stammered. "I'm just covering tonight." "But you're here," said a boy clutching a worn teddy bear, his right arm ending at the elbow. Nobody else would take Christmas Eve. Nobody else cared if we were alone. The children had surrounded him, their cold hands taking his, leading him down corridors that shifted and changed, sometimes modern hospital hallways, sometimes the same spaces as they had existed in 1962. Decorated with vintage Christmas garlands and paper chains. The smell of smoke lingered everywhere, though nothing burned. They brought him to a room he'd never seen before, despite having worked at Lakeville for 7 years. Inside, a Christmas tree decorated with handmade paper ornaments stood in the center, surrounded by simple wrapped gifts. 7 small beds lined the walls, each carefully made with hospital corners. "This was our home," explained an older boy who seemed to be their unofficial leader. "Some of us lived here for years. The nurses were our mothers, the doctors our fathers. When the fire came, we had nowhere to go. We've been waiting for someone to remember us," the pig-tailed girl added. "Every Christmas we try to celebrate, but nobody sees us anymore." Daniel had watched in astonishment as the children opened gifts, coloring books, toy cars, rag dolls, with the same excitement any child would show on Christmas morning. They sang carols together, their voices gradually growing stronger until they sounded alive again, the blue glow warming to a healthy pink flush in their cheeks. "Why me?" Daniel had asked finally. "Why can I see you when others couldn't?" The oldest boy, who'd introduced himself as Michael, looked at him with eyes too old for his young face. "Because you have the sight. Same as your grandmother did." Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. He'd never told anyone at the hospital that his grandmother had worked there in the 1960s as a night nurse. She died before he was born. "She was with us that night," Michael continued. "She tried to save us. The smoke was too thick, but she kept coming back in. She promised we wouldn't be alone, that she'd make sure someone remembered us every Christmas." The realization hit Daniel like a physical blow. His decision to volunteer for Christmas Eve hadn't been random. Somehow, he'd been fulfilling a promise made before his birth. When the clock struck 3:50 am, the children gathered around him one last time. "We can go now," the little girl with pigtails said. "The hospital will be gone, but you'll remember us. That's enough." "Take something to remind you," Michael said, pressing a small handmade Christmas ornament into Daniel's palm. A paper star with 7 names written in childish handwriting. "So you know it was real." In the months following the demolition, Daniel moved to his grandmother's old house, which he'd inherited years earlier, but had always rented out. While renovating the attic, he discovered a box of her journals, including entries from December 1962. The final page confirmed everything he'd experienced, ending with words that chilled him. "I've made arrangements for the children. Someone of my blood will watch over them until they're ready to move on. The price was high, but worth paying. I'll know when they're finally at peace, because that's when I'll be allowed to join them." Daniel's grandmother had died on Christmas Eve 1989, exactly 27 years after the fire, found with a peaceful smile and clutching a paper star ornament identical to the one the children had given him. Every Christmas Eve since the demolition, Daniel volunteers at children's hospitals across the country. At each one, he hangs a special paper star on their Christmas tree and tells the story of 7 children who only wanted to be remembered. And sometimes, just sometimes, he catches glimpses of them in the corridors, not lost or trapped anymore, but watching over the children still fighting for their lives, especially those who might otherwise spend Christmas alone. The deaths of the 7 elderly residents sent shockwaves through Pine Creek, a town where most families had lived for generations. The official cause of death was listed as simultaneous cardiac arrest of unknown origin, though the coroner privately admitted he'd never seen anything like it in 40 years of practice. Martin Reeves, the local historian who had recognized Walter Winter's handwriting, became obsessed with uncovering the full story. Though he hadn't received a card himself, he couldn't shake the feeling that the town's collective silence about the 1952 mining accident concealed something more sinister than simply abandoning a search too soon. In the town archives, buried in files marked restricted access, Martin discovered the original search and rescue reports. The official record stated that after 2 days of dangerous conditions and no signs of life, the search party had voted unanimously to end the operation. But handwritten notes from the mine foreman told a different story. Day 2, 10:45 p.m. Distinct tapping heard from the eastern shaft. 333 pattern repeated. Winters must be alive. Danvers and Miller want to continue, but Hayes says it's too dangerous with the methane levels. Put it to a vote. 7-2 against continuing. God help us, we're leaving him down there. His fiancée won't stop screaming at us. Says she'll make us pay if we abandon him. Martin's blood ran cold when he saw the names of the 7 who had voted to end the search. They matched exactly with the recent victims. Further investigation revealed Walter's fiancée, Elizabeth Blackwood, had come from a family rumored to practice mountain magic, folk traditions brought over from the old world and passed down through generations of women. After Walter's body was finally recovered months later, Elizabeth had disappeared from town, leaving behind only a cryptic journal that the sheriff had confiscated and buried in the same restricted files. Martin read Elizabeth's journal with growing horror. They left him to die slowly, buried alive in the dark. His fingers were worn to bone from tapping for help. For 58 days, he survived on groundwater and the rotting lunch in his pail, hoping someone would come. They heard him. They heard him and still they left him. I've promised him justice. The old ways require patience. The curse must age like fine whiskey minus 58 years for 58 days. When the time comes, he will return to collect his due. I sealed the pact with my own blood and his remaining finger bones. The 7 will know exactly how it feels to be abandoned in their hour of need, to have the life slowly squeezed from their lungs. The final pages detailed an elaborate ritual performed at the mine entrance on the 1-year anniversary of Walter's death. Elizabeth had created 7 Christmas cards using paper made from the wood of the collapsed support beams, ink mixed with coal dust from the mine, and Walter's pulverized finger bones. She'd sealed each card in wax made from cemetery candles and buried them at the mine entrance, to be unearthed when the time is ripe. As Martin pieced together this macabre history, he began experiencing strange phenomena himself. The smell of damp earth and coal dust in his sealed office, the sound of labored breathing behind him when he worked late, coal dust handprints appearing on research materials he'd left locked in his desk overnight. 1 week after his discoveries, on the 1-month anniversary of the 7 deaths, Martin found a Christmas card waiting on his desk, though his office had been locked. The winter scene depicted his house with smoke rising from the chimney, just like the original victims had received. Inside was a handwritten note. You've been asking questions about me, Martin. I appreciate your interest in my story, but some secrets should stay buried. Elizabeth promised me 7 souls to avenge my suffering, but she never said I had to stop there. I've developed a taste for justice, for warmth, for breath in my lungs again. See you soon. That evening, Martin frantically packed to leave town. planning to drive through the night to his sister's home several states away. As he threw clothes into a suitcase, he heard the distinctive sound of tapping on his bedroom window. 3 quick taps, 3 slow taps, 3 quick taps. When he turned, the window was fogged over from the outside. Despite the lack of precipitation, a message was being written by an invisible finger in the condensation. U-T-N-T-O-U Turun at G-H Ost. The next morning, Martin's car was found abandoned on the old mining road, engine still running, driver's door open. Inside the vehicle was a Christmas card identical to the others. Search parties combed the woods for days, but found no trace of him except for a trail of footprints leading toward the sealed mine entrance. Footprints that suddenly stopped midway, as if Martin had simply vanished into thin air. Eleanor became obsessed with discovering the truth behind the ornament and the apparition haunting her apartment. She took a week off work, her skin growing pale from lack of sunlight, as she pored through her grandmother's journals and letters, searching for answers. In the back of an old photo album, she discovered a yellowed newspaper clipping from December 26, 1897. The headline read, "Chatrest mass tragedy strikes Winters family." The article detailed how 7-year-old Victoria Winters had died in a house fire that started when her nightgown caught flame from a candle on the Christmas tree while her parents attended midnight mass, leaving her with an inexperienced young maid. A follow-up article revealed more disturbing details. Victoria hadn't died immediately. She'd been trapped in her bedroom for nearly an hour, the door jammed by fallen debris. Neighbors reported hearing her screams and desperate pounding on the windows, which were too high for rescuers to reach without ladders that arrived too late. Eleanor's hands trembled as she read her great-grandmother's diary entry from January 1898. We commissioned Mr. Glazier to create something to keep our Victoria with us always. He suggested a memorial ornament containing her ashes. Edward believes this will bring us comfort, but I fear we've done something unnatural. Victoria comes to me in dreams, begging to be released. Her burned face. I cannot bear it. The ornament grows cold to the touch when I hold it, as though something inside is drawing the warmth from my body. Edward insists we display it each Christmas, but I've begun to hear her crying from inside the glass. Subsequent entries grew increasingly disturbed, describing how Victoria's mother would sit for hours staring at the ornament, claiming she could see her daughter moving inside. The final entry, dated Christmas Eve 1899, read simply, Margaret took her life tonight. She left a note saying she was joining Victoria. The ornament was clutched in her hand, shattered, but when I collected the pieces, they reassembled themselves before my eyes. God forgive us for what we've done. Eleanor called the only person who might understand, Dr. Abigail Chen, a former college friend who specialized in paranormal research. Abigail arrived the next day, equipment in tow, her expression growing grave as Eleanor recounted her experiences. Objects can become vessels, Abigail explained, scanning the now restored ornament with specialized equipment, especially when created with such specific intention and containing human remains. Your great-great-aunt's spirit has been trapped for over a century, experiencing the trauma of her death on an endless loop. How is that possible? Eleanor asked. The ornament was broken. The vessel may break, but the binding remains, Abigail said. By hanging it on your tree, you provided heat and light, the elements of fire that trigger her trauma and strengthen her connection to this plane. That night, they performed a ritual Abigail had designed, intended to release Victoria's spirit. As they chanted the final words, the temperature in the apartment plummeted so rapidly that water glasses shattered. The ornament began to spin on the table, emitting a high-pitched keening that forced them to cover their ears. In the bathroom mirror, Eleanor caught a glimpse of Victoria, no longer the desperate child, but a burned, blackened figure with exposed bone where her face should be. The apparition lunged at the mirror, shattering it from the other side, glass exploding outward. You can't send me away. Victoria's voice rasped from every reflective surface simultaneously. This is my home now. I've waited too long for a family. Eleanor awoke the next morning on the floor, Abigail nowhere to be found. On the table lay Abigail's notebook, open to a hastily scribbled page. binding too strong. Not just the girl trapped. Something else used her trauma. Get out now. In the bedroom, Eleanor discovered Abigail's clothes laid out on the bed, empty as if their occupant had simply vanished, a thin layer of ash covering the fabric. The ornament hung on the bedroom doorknob, completely restored, the scene inside now showing two figures, the small girl in Victorian dress and a woman resembling Abigail, both staring out with hollow eyes. When Eleanor tried to leave the apartment, she discovered every exit led back to her living room. Phones called only one number regardless of what she dialed, her own apartment. Every mirror and window showed not the outside world, but Victorian-era rooms consumed by flames. That evening, Eleanor's mother received a Christmas card containing a small, intricately painted glass ornament and a note in her daughter's handwriting. "Mom, I found something in Grandma's things I think you should have. It's a family heirloom. Be sure to hang it on the tree on Christmas Eve." In the years following the Henderson family tragedy, the mountain cabin remained unsold, becoming the subject of local legend. Real estate agents refused to list it after 3 separate agents experienced inexplicable health issues following visits to the property. The cabin stood abandoned, yet hikers and hunters reported seeing lights in the windows each Christmas Eve and hearing the faint sound of carols despite the property having no electricity. Jason Henderson, Amy's older brother, was the only family member who didn't receive a wooden ornament the Christmas after their cabin incident. This absence haunted him more than the gift itself might have. Now 32, he had spent the past decade researching folklore about the Christmas collector, finding similar entities described in obscure alpine legends dating back centuries. A winter spirit that made bargains with desperate families, offering protection in exchange for periodic tributes. Jason had become a renowned anthropologist specializing in winter solstice traditions, though colleagues never knew his research was driven by personal experience. His basement office walls were covered with transcribed accounts of similar visitations across different cultures: Norse, Germanic, Slavic, all describing an entity that visited isolated homes during winter storms, collecting human tributes while leaving personalized tokens behind. With each passing year, Jason watched his family members grow more distant and troubled. Those who had received the wooden ornaments developed a strange Christmas obsession, creating elaborate holiday displays and insisting on celebrating alone. Several had been hospitalized for hypothermia after being found sitting in unheated rooms on Christmas Eve, staring out windows at nothing. 3 had died under mysterious circumstances, their bodies discovered with peaceful expressions and completely drained of heat, as if flash frozen from the inside. Amy, now 18, had never spoken since that night, communicating only through intricate drawings of the tall figure with its crown of holly. Her artwork had gained a cult following online, with fans unaware of the true inspiration behind her disturbing images. Jason had become her caretaker after their parents' deaths 2 years earlier, both found frozen in their beds, despite the house being a comfortable 72 degrees. As the 10th Christmas as the cabin incident approached, Jason noticed Amy's drawings changing. The entity now appeared in every scene with 11 small wooden figures, clutched in its elongated fingers, and one full-sized human figure walking beside it. Amy had circled the word "Fine Owl" on her calendar for December 24th. Jason consulted Dr. Eleanor Marsh, a specialist in folkloric entities who had documented similar cases. Her theory chilled him. These bargains typically last generations, with the entity collecting one family member each decade, but occasionally, there's a final gathering, when the entity returns for all remaining members at once, ending the covenant. The night before Christmas Eve, Jason barricaded himself and Amy in their panic room, equipped with every protective measure folklore suggested: iron thresholds, salt lines, rowan wood crosses, and modern security. He'd installed heat sensors, motion detectors, and continuous recording devices throughout the house. At exactly midnight, every electronic device failed simultaneously, despite redundant battery backups. The temperature in the sealed panic room plummeted, their breath condensing in the suddenly frigid air. Amy, for the first time in 10 years, spoke, her voice a whisper that didn't sound entirely her own. It's time to go home, Jason. Everyone's waiting. The security door to the panic room, designed to withstand explosives, swung open of its own accord. In the doorway stood not the tall entity Jason had expected, but his deceased great-uncle Philip, looking exactly as he had the night he died at the cabin, extending his hand with a gentle smile. The bargain wasn't for protection, Philip explained softly. It was for family. Great-grandfather was alone, dying in that blizzard in 1939. The collector offered him generations of descendants in exchange for bringing them all home eventually. Tonight's the gathering he was promised. No one comes unwillingly. Behind Philip stood every deceased Henderson family member, their expressions serene, each holding their wooden ornament. Among them, Jason recognized faces from old photographs, ancestors he'd never met, including his great-grandfather, the cabin's builder. Beyond the assembled family, partially obscured in shadows, waited the tall figure with its crown of holly and impossibly wide smile, patiently counting on elongated fingers. Amy stood and took Philip's outstretched hand. "It doesn't hurt, Jason," she said, her voice suddenly clear. "It feels like Christmas morning when we were kids. Please come with us. I don't want to go without you." The security cameras, the only electronics still functioning, recorded Jason's final moments as he made his choice, the footage discovered days later by concerned colleagues. The image showed Jason taking his sister's hand, a peaceful expression transforming his face. As they stepped forward together, their bodies seemed to dissolve into swirling patterns of frost, leaving behind only two perfectly carved wooden figures that fell gently to the floor.